Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in today. On the show, we have another very special guest. This fellow, though, is unique, and he goes by the $1 Million Maverick. So welcome to the show, Mr. Alan Weiss, PhD. Glad to have you on. And let me read his bio for us all real quick so you kind of understand a little bit about what he's been up to lately. Now, Alan is a New York Times bestselling author, and he's written 63, that's right, 63 books that have been published in a dozen or so languages. Now, he's written more books on consulting than anyone else, period. Mr. Weiss is a thought leader on solo practice consulting training, coaching, and facilitating. His consulting firm, Summit Consulting Group Incorporated, well, guys, it's attracted clients from over 500 leading organizations around the world. He also leads the $1 Million Consulting College, the By Invitation Only Club, 6 Figures to 7 workshops, and the Thought Leadership Conference. Alan regularly appears in all media outlets, and with this monthly video, The Writing on the Wall, which features Bentley, the Wonder Dog, and he also produces his own weekly podcast. Now, Mr. Weiss is a frequent executive-level keynote speaker, regularly presents in London, UK, Sydney, Australia, as well as several major cities across the United States. He has created the strongest independent consulting brand in the world, which is represented by his 25-year bestseller, $1 Million Coaching, which, by the way, is now in its 5th edition, along with his global coaching program for high achievers and aspiring entrepreneurs, which he calls the Private Roster Mentor Program. Now, Mr. Weiss's specialties include keynote speaking, organizational development, consulting, entrepreneurialism, coaching, counseling, mentoring, major change initiatives, self-esteem development, and positive psychology development. Welcome to the show, Alan. How are you this morning?
Thanks, Mike. I can listen to you forever. That's wonderful.
You know, it almost went on forever, but I do have a quick question for you. I was reading through some of your content. By the way, it is marvelous. Congratulations, and thank you for sharing that. But I have to ask you, have you made it to North Dakota yet?
Nope. I have no intention of going.
There's nothing in North Dakota for you.
No one's ever invited me, and I've seen Fargo. That's enough.
Yeah. I wondered if you had made it up there, maybe with this whole fracking that was going on a few years back or not, but it doesn't seem like it. Do you have a count of how many countries? Last I counted was 50. Have you been to more than 50 now, different countries?
61.
61 countries. It's really it's a global business market that we're into now. But you, my friend, you were out there as a real maverick. You were doing it before it was easy to do. In fact, I'd like to kind of ask you an interesting question. How was it like to be on an airplane where people could smoke cigarettes?
Well, the smoking was pretty bad. You know, I've never smoked cigarettes, and smoking rows and non-smoking rows were kind of silly. However, you know, in the old 747s, you know, they just announced this morning they're discontinuing the A380, which is one of my very favorite planes, showers and bars and everything. And in the old 747s, when I'd fly to Australia for 13, 14 hours, they just had regular reclining seats. There were no beds or anything, but there was a spiral staircase, and upstairs was a guy playing a piano, and they served cocktails. There was no security. You just walked on airplanes, and people dressed decently. They didn't dress like slobs. So while it was less comfortable in some ways, it was more comforting in other ways.
Yeah, it's well said. And I think that businesses and even our culture is kind of going that way in many regards, and it might not be for the best. But before we dig into what's going on currently, can you tell us 63 books? That's a lot of work. And I was actually very impressed. I looked at your Writing on the Wall videos, and I was doing the math, and I said, well, this guy's up to like 150 episodes. And he's doing them once a month. So I'm doing the quick math, and it's absolutely a tribute to your consistency and dedication to your craft that you've been doing those for a dozen years, which is very remarkable. But can you tell us how you got started into this life as a $1 Million Maverick?
Well, I mean, I'll make it as short as I can. When I began my career at Prudential Insurance, which was like being in prison, I was recruited out of there to a training firm in Princeton, New Jersey, where I learned the training business. I left there to become president of a firm here in Rhode Island, a behavioral consulting firm. But the owner and I hated each other. It was W. Clement Stone, the very wealthy financier, the guy who bailed out Napoleon Hill, who was himself a disaster. And when Clement Stone fired me after 15 months, I said, I will never work for a moron again. I will never work for someone who can fire me again. I'm going to go out on my own. My wife said, fine, forget about the mortgage, she said, but you better get serious. And so I resolved two things. First is, this is a relationship business. And second is that I would never charge by a day, an hour, a head, a box of materials. I would only charge by value. And those two decisions really saved my life. And so we were poor. We had no money really saved up. Our kids were in private school. And I got serious. And I wrote $1 Million Consulting was my fourth book. And I wrote that book in 91, and I was fired in 85.
No kidding. Now, $1 Million Consulting, that's a key component of what I wanted to really dig into, because a lot of the listeners on the call are consultants themselves. They're either product representatives, or we call them wholesalers, and they consult with financial advisors who then in turn consult with their clients to use those products. So consulting back in 1991, what ways is it the same as it is today? And then what ways has it changed?
Well, it's the same in that it's still a relationship business. It's the same in that you still have to find the economic buyer, the person who can authorize and approve a check, and stop talking to low-level people and human resource people and people who can't say yes but can say no. It's the same in that people need results. It's different in that there's no more big eight. There's no more of these big accounting firms that went into consulting. There's like a big 2.5 maybe. And just like the mammals taking over from the dinosaurs because they were fast and nimble, today it's much easier for small firms, solo practices, boutique firms to make money and to help people because the economy is roaring. This is the greatest economy right now, in the United States at least, in the history of the earth. There's pragmatically zero unemployment, anything under 5% people who don't want to work. So it's zero unemployment. And companies need help because there's no residual talent. Human resources is hopeless. I mean, people are in human resources for a reason. There's nothing else they can do. And they don't have the clout to do anything, they don't have the skills to do anything. So companies need somebody from the outside who can come in like a stiletto, get something fixed or improved or changed, and then leave again. It's very cost effective, and it's very lucrative for the consultant.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great kind of an update on, in your eyes, I really give a lot of respect to, because you've seen it. I had no idea that you were actually friends with Earl Clement Stone, or not friends. So that's even more interesting. You've seen quite a bit, and now you think it's going to be, the darkness is coming, right? I mean, the economy can't run forever.
Well, sure it can. What you just saw over the past month or two was a correction. Mm-hmm. And the definition of a bull market isn't that there are no lows. It's that the lows are always higher than the prior lows. And so what happens here is, if you think about it, we've already set a record. This has been running for 10 years or more. The reason I can say it's going to run into the foreseeable future is that where else are people going to put their money? You don't make money in banks. Europe is a disaster. The economic union is a disaster, and it's coming apart with Brexit and everything else. China is in terrible shape right now. Japan is struggling. The Middle East is a wreck. Where else are you going to put your money except into American stocks? And so, and you have to understand also that the economy and the stock market are two different things. And there's not a direct proportion there. So this economy is roaring. All the net new jobs in the United States and Canada are created by small business, not large business. Fortune 500 firms don't create jobs, they eliminate jobs. But small business creates jobs. And so when anybody comes into a governmental position and says, raise the taxes on small business, make it more difficult to run a small business, they have no clue. They don't know what they're talking about. Small business has to be encouraged. And small businesses today, what you call SMEs, are using consultants more than ever.
Well, so if someone wants to get started into this consulting field, which you're very positive about, and in fact, very encouraging about, should they start out trying to develop a niche market, or would you recommend that they make themselves available and kind of spread their breadth, at least to get some traction?
I've always been a generalist because it opens the door to more buyers. And I've always been somebody who urges people to be a process consultant, not a content consultant. And by that, I mean, You could be an expert in how to make, brake cylinders for cars, or you could be an expert in how to make, vending machines that dispense candy or something. But the problem is there are only so many of those firms that can use your business, and those things become obsolete after a while themselves. A process consultant, somebody who's an expert in problem solving or decision making or priority setting or conflict resolution, can apply that across industries. And so if you're a process expert, a critical thinking expert, anybody can use you. And all those firms you talked about earlier with whom I've worked are in very diverse businesses.
Yeah, I noticed that, and it's kind of a different angle. Most people out there are preaching to develop a niche, be somebody in that niche marketplace, and you're actually the second fellow this year. I had Jeffrey Gittimer on the show, and he also said to don't get pigeonholed, don't operate in a vacuum where you can't be nimble and move around. So
well, he's been very successful in his field. He's been very inventive. And the two of us are right, and everybody else is wrong. I mean, that's what it comes to. New Hampshire has a phrase on its license plates, live free or die. My feeling is there's got to be something in between.
I love it. Jeffrey's podcast is called Sell or Die, so I'm not sure if he saw New Hampshire license plate when he was thinking about that.
My podcast is called The Uncomfortable Truth.
It is, and it's wonderful. In fact, I have to just congratulate you again. Being a producer of content, or at least I'm attempting to do that, I really admired and respected a lot of the episodes. In fact, I'll just tell you, one of my favorite ones was a recent one. And now every time I'm walking around, I used to call it Murphy's Law. My wife's maiden name is Murphy. So for 22 years, I've been used to what could go wrong going wrong, right? But you, sir, you call it a Wile E. Coyote moment. And I was tickled when I read that. But you mentioned that Wile E. Coyote, he shouldn't have tried everything that Acme developed, the rocket-powered roller skates and all of that stuff. You actually said that he should have went somewhere that offers Roadrunner takeout and let somebody else do that. How can we apply that kind of a concept into our businesses today, whether we're a financial advisor or we're a product representative?
You have to use reversal. You have to be a contrarian. So, for example, instead of wondering about how you get food to people, bring people to the food. Instead of trying to figure out, there's a famous case that Russ Acuff, the late Russ Acuff, dealt with in London. He was a great consultant from University of Pennsylvania. But they had these conductors on London buses, and they had to collect money and give people tickets, and the buses were piling up. And they talked about putting more conductors on the buses or fewer buses. Acuff said, take the conductors off the buses and put them on the street corners. The line form on the corner. People just walk on the bus. So you have to think differently, and you have to think from the result backwards. You can't think about your methodology and where you are today and moving forward. You have to think from the result and say, how do I get there fastest and easiest? And that's the secret. But something, I'll tell you, Mike, you can't think outside the box unless you're standing outside the box.
You can't think outside the box unless you're actually standing outside the box. That's actually very profound if you think about it. How could you possibly think about outside the box if you're in the damn box?
That's right. Everything constrains you.
Yeah, you can't do that. Now, you're talking about thinking, and what you just described was a very logical reversal of the procedure. Another one of your episodes, I think it was just a blog, though, was from a couple of years ago, and you titled it, "Are You Feeling What I'm Thinking?" And let me just quickly read a couple pieces from it. You said, therapists are famous for responding to a patient's comment with, I didn't ask you what you thought about your family. I asked you how you feel about your family. Alan, you said your observation in business is that logic tends to make people think and emotion tends to encourage people to act. And you say this, however, as consultants, you have to revert to the logical, not the emotional. You may feel someone isn't treated well or that a boss doesn't give proper credit or that the environment stifles innovation, but what is the evidence? Police and investigators don't work on emotion. They work on proof and the facts. And then you warn us, don't let your emotions guide your advice or your actions in business, or you may soon be out of business. Now, Alan, I've always read and been told that you have to connect emotionally with people, that people make decisions emotionally and then justify it with logic. Are you saying the same thing, or is it sounding like you're saying the opposite?
No, I'm saying something very different. For consultants, in the marketing process, you have to reach an emotional level because emotion makes people act. And so the buyer has to viscerally, emotionally feel the need to do business with you. The buyer has to feel that he or she will gain personally as well as professionally. However, once you have the business, then you take the emotion out of it and you're strictly intellectual about what you find. And so you have to ask, what's the observed behavior and what's the evidence? People come running up and say, oh, the boss is a monster, he doesn't listen. And the consultant might say, boss monster doesn't listen. And this is called recency bias. You listen to the last thing you heard. So when you're doing an investigation, which is my police reference you talked about there, you want to stick strictly to the facts. When you're dealing with someone to convince them to do something, you want to appeal to the emotions.
Yeah, it's well said. Thank you for that. I want to ask a question. I know you've been in business for quite some time, and it's kind of interesting. How did you get clients? How did you operate before the internet? I believe it's a fax machine behind you over there.
No, it's a printer.
There's a printer, and isn't there a fax machine to the left of it?
But no, that's a postage meter.
Oh, a postage meter. I didn't even know what that is.
The postage meter.
And
my fax is, I don't really get faxes anymore, but they come on my computer.
Gotcha. So
but you're right about back when I started. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. How was it just a lot harder to do, or was it?
Well, no, you know what? Well, it wasn't harder to do because you didn't know there was no easier way. So it wasn't harder. It's like asking people to ride horses. Wasn't that harder than driving a car? Well, they didn't have cars. So here's the thing. What you got used to was picking up the phone and calling people. And there was no voicemail. People answer their phone, or you talk to an assistant and you said, put them on. You wrote letters. You got in your car and you drove to see people, and you got on a plane, you flew to see people. But that meant they were there. So nobody could use an excuse. I didn't get your email. I didn't get your phone call. I didn't expect you to show up today. And so you had to travel more, and you had to be more patient because communications took longer. But you were able to reach people. Today, it's far easier to reach people with email, you would think, but a lot of people ignore their email, or it goes to a spam folder, or they just let it pile up, like they're collecting rocks. The same thing with voicemail. You see these messages, these pink slips on people's desks just piling up. So I think that what you find today is, while you can communicate faster, it's also easier for people to ignore the communication. And you get lost in the noise.
So how does someone stand out? How would you recommend, if you were mentoring a young person getting into the sales and consulting business, what techniques or what approaches would you recommend?
Good question. You have to put your intellectual property, your IP, into the public square. You have to get your IP and build your brand and your visibility. I call it shameless promotion, into the public square. If you don't blow your own horn, there is no music. And so you have to let people know you're there. So you talk about things. You appear at conferences for free. You publish in the newspapers. You host an event. You call everyone you know and let them know what you're doing. But as you do this, what you have to be talking about is something special. You can't say, leadership needs commitment from others, and you're the 950,000th person saying that. Who the hell cares? What you need to say is something like this. A leader doesn't need commitment. A leader needs compliance. A leader needs to force people to follow. If we had good kings, we'd still be monarchists. Lincoln Steffens said that, by the way. So, but when you say that, I might not agree with you, but I am saying, what the hell? I need to hear more from this person. So you need to get out there and talk differently. Lencioni has 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, his book. So on LinkedIn every day, there's this company promulgating the 5 major traits of a team. It's derivative. It's a copycat. It's nearly plagiarism, for God's sake. You have to be original. And if you're original, people will listen.
Yeah, that's a part of that recentism as well. A lot of folks that I talk to have never heard of W. Clement Stone, and very few of them have ever heard of Napoleon Hill.
Good for them.
Yeah, well, but it's interesting because they're getting. Go ahead. You have a comment about that? Go ahead.
Well, who they should hear about is Peter Drucker. Who they should hear about is Frederick Hertzberg. These are the names they should know. These people who contributed tremendously to organization development and strategy and so forth. Those names are fine. But you don't want to hear about the charlatans. Nobody should go to bed studying Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, well said. Now, as the business environment continues to evolve, women are becoming more and more, I guess, competitors in the marketplace. When you first started out, was it even? I'm assuming that it was a very male dominated landscape, and are you also seeing it start to become populated with more women competitors?
Are you talking about the business, or are you talking about consulting?
Both, actually. In fact, just the idea of working women and corporate, juggernaut women that are kind of coming to power.
It was very different when I was first consulting. Fortune magazine ran a piece on, I think, the 10 most powerful women in business in America, and Time magazine had Judy Lewent, who was the chief financial officer of Merck at the time, one of my clients, on the cover of the magazine. Maybe it was Business Week that time. So it was that rare that they talked about these women, but it was increasing. There were more and more women coming into the workplace and being respected, and the movement was just really getting some steam under it. It had been largely male-dominated. In consulting, it was largely male-dominated, and there were some women in the mix. There still aren't enough women today, but in my community, my global community, it's about 50-50 right now, women and men. And the problem in consulting was, it was a good old boys network. And you'd go to some of these association meetings, and these guys would be talking about, how much to bill by the hour and who to take to play golf. And I mean, it was even distressing for another white male, let alone for a minority or a woman or anything else. So, thankfully, those days are just about gone.
Well, it's interesting. I just had a woman on the show, an attractive woman, young lady, and she openly admitted that she works hard to stay in shape and to look good, and that she doesn't see anything wrong with a woman owning her beauty and sometimes even using some sexuality to get attention in business. And then I read a post by Barbara Corcoran. She's the New York real estate mogul on Shark Tank. And she also admits to wearing short skirts and showing off her nice legs to get an advantage, she calls it, in selling to men. And I thought about it for a second. Maybe I just had a Wile E. Coyote moment where it's just not fair. What do you think about that? Are the women not playing fair?
Well, I think very few women do that. I think most women are professional, and anybody, man or woman, wants to look good. That is, they want to look professional. I mean, you're silly, man or woman, if you walk into a client meeting and your hair isn't washed and your collar is frayed, and your shoes aren't shined, and so forth. I mean, I've always advocated, if you can only afford one good suit, buy one good suit and wear it to the first client or prospect meeting. You should look good. I have no trouble with that. I think that if a woman uses sexuality to try to influence, it's as bad as a man sexually harassing. I think it's completely inappropriate. And I think, what's her name? Barbara Corcoran, did you say?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Her legs aren't that great.
Leave it to you to throw another Wile E. Coyote moment in there. That was the stopping of the Roadrunner. But I agree with what you're saying about looking good and about keeping it professional. And there is that fine line. And I appreciate your comments on being professional. In fact, the gal that I was talking with on the show, she said that at the end of the day, if someone tries to use their beauty to get business but doesn't have the brains to back it up, they're not going to get the business anyways.
Well, I think it's also a very shallow belief in the person with whom you're dealing. I mean, the belief that you'll be able to sell to someone because you're using sexuality, I think is a very naive and shallow state of mind. And I don't think most people would buy it. In fact, most people, I think, would be turned off by it.
Yeah, I agree. It's very sophomoric. Now, speaking of showing off and looking good, though, you kind of do it a little bit yourself. And I've enjoyed watching your videos where you show us, which some of them are beautiful cars that you own and you drive, and your dogs are handsome dogs. And even yourself, you take care of yourself. Where is the line? I mean, is there a line when you roll up in a Rolls Royce that you're trying to establish or trying to cross? What's the point of doing that?
Well, my brand is lifestyle. I mean, my brand is people leading a good life. And, $1 million consulting is a metaphor. You might not need $1 million to lead your good life. Maybe you need 650,000 or whatever. Maybe you need 3 million. But $1 million consulting is a metaphor for you can create what you need to live your good life. And my brand is such that I believe in first-class travel. I believe in visiting places all over the world. I believe in fine wine and good food and enjoying what life has to offer because you've earned it. I'm not using my daddy's money here. My daddy used my money. So everything I spend, I earn. My kids use my money. So, and I'm proud of it. I'm happy to do that. So, but that's my brand. And, at one point I had 2 exotic cars, and my wife said, now you've done it. She said, you got nothing you can drive to a client. So I drove my Ferrari down to Merck, to an appointment at Merck. And a guy walks by who I don't know. He's not my appointment. And he says, is that your Spider out there? I said, yeah. He said, I have a Testarossa. He said, before you leave, why don't you stop in my office? Well, he was an executive vice president. And we developed a relationship. We developed business. When I got home, I said to my wife, you see this car? It's another marketing investment.
That's actually, that's wonderful to hear. And it's very appropriate. A lot of the wholesalers that are on the line, we kind of balance this act. Do I want to show up driving a 10-year-old, Buick, which is a fine car, or do I want to really show up and driving the E350, which is the car that I would like to drive and feel good about?
Listen to me. I believe in the 1% solution. You improve by 1% in 70 days, you're twice as good. Maybe this is the 1% for some of your viewers, based on what you just said. People want to do business with a success. They do not want to do business with someone who's struggling. They want to do business with a success. They don't want a brain surgeon who's out of school looking for patients. They want the brain surgeon who thinks he or she is God and can cure anything. All right? And so people feel better dealing with successful people, and never be afraid to hide your success. Don't push it in someone's face. Don't show up and say, come out to the parking lot, I want you to see my car. But don't be ashamed to drive it there.
Love it. Love it. I'm a fan of that. And in fact, you might know the name of the show is called the Awesome Wholesaler Experience. I call myself Awesome Mike. Awesome is an acronym, but really I like to split it in half and say, I'm just trying to awe some, not everyone. And some people might not get it or find it as funny as I do. Let me continue on here. Let's talk about false accolades. Now, you did a post about this, and the last count you had 17 initials.
Yeah.
Behind your name. I mean, you must not have a business card. You must have a scroll of something with all your.
I don't use them. I don't use them.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that in a second. Now, you did mention, why would someone who's writing an article about one topic put on there that they're a chiropractor because they're a doctor, or your favorite one is MA that they put behind their names.
So just Alan Weiss, that says. And if you want to put PhD after your name, okay. If you want to put MD after your name, makes sense. MBA makes sense. If you're in engineering, PE is professional engineer, makes sense. I dealt for 2 years. My client was the American Institute of Architects. And at that time, if you paid dues, you put AIA after your name. But AIA only meant at that time you were just paying dues. It didn't mean you were registered, a licensed, or special architect. And these people with, I love coaching universities, and you get coaching initials. Anybody can coach. You don't need a university to tell you how to coach. I mean, who certifies the certifiers, right? So anytime I see initials, I get suspicious. And if I see more than 3 of them, I get really, really cynical.
Yeah, in the financial services business, they have certified financial planners, chartered life underwriter. It really goes on.
Right.
And I think it's almost a shill that the university, the American college, or whoever it is that's propagating these, they're using it to make money. They're just selling these designations.
Well, here's the difference. I mean, when I was in the insurance business, I remember chartered life underwriter was difficult to get. And I can see making people pass certain exams to ensure that they are worthy, to ensure that they have competence and expertise. But once you've received the CLU, they say you may now hang out your shingle, fine. But putting all these initials out for the public really doesn't do anything. This is a relationship business. And if I don't have confidence in you, I don't care how many initials you produce, I'm not doing business with you.
Now, do you think a person that's starting out can use a couple of extra initials to kind of gain their credibility? Or do you think that's false?
No, I think it's ridiculous. I think if you don't have the self-worth, if you don't have the confidence that you can credibly help people, tacking initials after your name is just a sign of, low self-esteem, because no buyer's impressed by that. I mean, you and I have both met PhDs who needed someone to show them where the restroom is. It's just not impressive. We've had college professors who we said, my God, shoot them. On the other hand, I've listened to people who are high school dropouts who I thought were brilliant. And so we have to judge the person by his or her character and not by the initials that trail after them, like some kind of trail of cans tied together.
That's what it looks like too. A trail of cans tied together. You mentioned self-esteem there, and I look back, and it was a long time ago. I believe it was 12 years ago, and you mentioned that you were looking at the problems in the environment, the consulting environment, the business environment, and you came up with the kind of the baseline problem, and you said that the problem is self-esteem or lack thereof.
Right.
So that became your charge. How's that going? How do you see self-esteem in business and in America, or even in the world today?
Well, first of all, it's not culturally related. In other words, it's a problem worldwide. It's a problem throughout different cultures, and it gets worse because today things move so fast, and there's so much noise, and there's so much normative pressure. Join this, do this, listen to this, be here, that people feel left out if they don't do something. And so self-esteem is a huge problem. It's the reason people don't charge more as consultants. It's the reason that people get themselves bullied by clients. It's the reason that people don't blow their own horn. So it's a question of really building up the keys that give you strength and confidence in your judgment. I call it the courage of your talent, so that you can overcome these esteem deficiencies. Because there's a difference between being good at something, which is efficacy, and feeling you have self-worth, which is esteem. So you can do something poorly, but still feel that you're a worthy person. And just because you do something well doesn't mean you're a worthy person. These are two independent variables.
Wow. So you mentioned a little bit about not tooting your own horn, and I think in America, especially, maybe even worldwide, though, it has become out of favor. It's not in vogue to toot your own horn, and you talk about basically death by political correctness. What's your opinion on the state of political correctness, and how is that affecting our self-esteem?
Well, political correctness is killing free speech. Right now, we have people all over the country digging through old yearbooks to find some kind of misdeeds people did 35, 45 years ago. And not one of us in our youth didn't say stupid things, right? Now, sexual harassment, rape, these things are crimes. And they're crimes forever. If you did it at 17, it's a crime. If you did it at 37, it's a crime. If you do it at 77, it's a crime. I'm not talking about that. But there are things we say, there are slurs that we issue where we're unthinking, we don't know what we're doing. If they continue, there's something wrong with us, and we deserve to be banned or punished or whatever. But if it was something that happened 35 years ago, give me a break. On top of that, you have this presentism, where here's Brown University up here, sitting on a hill as the high and mighty, and they won't honor Columbus Day. It's got to be Indigenous Peoples Day. And they won't call it a Christmas tree. It's got to be a holiday tree. I'm serious. This is Brown. However, Brown University is named directly after the most heinous slave trading family in the history of this country and its antecedents. But that's okay. See, they won't change the name of the university. So we have this tremendous hypocrisy. Some woman can't stand to walk past a prayer in a school, and it's got to be, dynamited off the cement wall. On the other hand, Congress begins every day with a prayer, and our currency says, "In God we trust." And so, you have an American flag behind you, and people would have a fit if they saw an American flag in some public meeting somewhere, claiming they shouldn't have to be, exposed to it. Political correctness is killing us. This country's supposed to be a melting pot, not a salad bowl.
Yeah, I appreciate your humor in there, but that's actually very poignant. A melting pot, not a salad bowl. So political correctness, the president has, let's say, swung the pendulum back somewhat the other way for political correctness. Do you see the future having more of that happen? Do you see the future of folks putting their foot down and saying, no, I won't be taken hostage, I won't be a victim of political correctness? Or do you think it's just a slow race to the bottom?
Oh, no, we're in the middle of it. I mean, look, this is not a political statement. The reason Trump was elected, in my opinion, was because people were tired of being told that they are somehow morally filthy, that they shouldn't use the language that they use, that they have to honor every single grievance that's brought in front of them, no matter who's bringing it and for what cause. They got tired of this. And so Trump had this huge upset win. If either party fields another candidate who appears to be extraordinarily progressive. I mean, look what just happened in New York. Amazon said goodbye, took its jobs and its money with it. It was a good deal for everyone. Amazon was not being indecent here. It was a good job for everyone. But basically, this freshman congresswoman, I repressed her name, Octavia Cortez, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
And a New York City counselor and a state legislator, actually 3 people really undermined this and did a huge disservice to the people of New York and the economy of New York. So consequently, I think we'll continue to see more of a centrist position. I'll give you a prediction right here. Again, I'm not stating a political position, but my feeling is that if the Democrats ran Joe Biden, he would win because he's seen as a centrist Democrat. I think it's got to be somebody like that, Republican or Democrat. He's got to be somebody like that in the future because we can't continue in this direction because people are getting sick of it.
Well, let's apply it to the field that our listeners are, which are these wholesalers and financial advisors. How would you recommend that they use political correctness or not?
I think they need discretion. And here's what I mean, though. I think it's quite proper to use pronouns like he or she, or to use a plural, they were there instead of he was there, right? I think you have to watch. I think it's legitimate. It's not painful. It's easy to do. I think you have to be careful in your interactions with people that you treat everyone equally, no matter who they are, and that you don't show favoritism. I mean, some of the people in my community specialize in hidden bias. They're not talking about diversity or inclusion, but hidden bias. And there are hidden biases. We have to be careful. I know a woman whose last name is Chinese and who's of Chinese derivation, and I've known her for 10 years, and she got me into a great Chinese restaurant in San Francisco. And I said, please get me the crab. I love the crab here. And she said, he'll have the crab. And I said, I could have done that. And she said, why do you think I can speak Chinese? I don't speak Chinese. Now, that's a hidden bias, right? Now, we both laughed about it, but I'm conscious of that now. We have to use that kind of discretion. But I don't think that we need to bend over backwards. And I don't think that anyone should expect that every grievance they have should justify that the entire earth stop moving and everybody focus on their grievance. You know, I kid my friends in Canada when I was watching the beginning of the Vancouver Olympics. They said they were going to introduce every indigenous people in Canada. And after about 2 hours, I said, apparently, what you've decided to do is to introduce every person in Canada.
Exactly. That's funny. That is really funny. You know, that's exhausting sometimes, isn't it? To try to be perfectly politically correct.
It's impossible because there's always somebody unhappy. You know, there's always somebody unhappy. And, you know, I was waiting at a hotel once to register in this line. And I was about 4th or 5th in line. And a woman in a wheelchair came in behind me. And as the line, something happened and we all had to step back and I bumped into her. And she said to me, of course, she said, I'm down here and bump into me. Well, if she had been standing up, I would have bumped into her too, right? But she was looking to be aggrieved. She was looking to make some case. And too many people are walking around looking to make their case. And, you know, how long can you walk on eggshells?
Yeah, eventually you get fed up, and that's, I think it can be explosive when that happens. You know, I want to shift gears just a little bit. You mentioned in one of your posts, which I really appreciate because I'm of that vernacular to where I like paper things. I like tangible things, and you mentioned paper over pixels. Now, it was a while ago, probably 10 years ago. You had your note binder, you had your calendar. You mentioned if you spill coffee on it, you can replace it, or it doesn't cost you $1,000 to reboot it, but like a computer would. Do you have the same opinion? Are you of the same opinion that it should be paper over pixels?
Well, for some things, like here's my Filofax, and it's on my desk right next to me. And if I'm making a date with 6 people in one of my mastermind groups that I run, I will have a date here faster than any of them will, as they peck away like woodpeckers on their, smartphones and their iPads and whatever they have with them. So, I can turn a page. I see exactly what I have to do. I can see the year at a glance, the entire year at a glance. They can't do that. For those purposes, yeah. When I'm writing a book, I write from my head to the screen. So there's a place for everything, but I think we shouldn't be seduced by technology. We should use it where it's most appropriate.
Yeah. Is there a favorite technology that you're seeing that's out there now that you're really enjoying using? I don't know if it's going to be social media or video. Video's not new, but is there one you
Well,
like the most?
I'll tell you something. If you take a look at the iPhone, I buy every new generation. It's not a phone. I use it the least for calling. I watch my stocks. I play games. I check email. I make flight plans. I track my flights, and so forth and so on. And so, maybe 20% of it is in use as a phone, maybe less than that. But I think the iPhone, sort of this personal digital assistant, has certainly made a place. I also think, there's, I'm afraid to say the name, but there's an Alexa sitting over here, and there's another one in the bedroom. And I can, in new cars, you're just going to give voice commands that will put on, I have a heads-up display in my cars. You're just going to give a voice command, and it'll say, put up the navigation to my favorite Italian restaurant, and there it will be. And those kinds of things are safety elements. They're wonderful, just like these cameras they have in cars today, So I think you're going to see an increasing amount of safety. What I don't think is you're going to see 360 million Americans in electric driverless cars moving around like ants in a colony. That is not going to happen.
That is not attractive, even to think about it.
Well, one of my favorite lines is, Elon Musk wants to send a rocket to Mars, but he can't send a Tesla to California.
That's good. That's a good one. Elon Musk, I believe he is one. And you mentioned that you are one. And in fact, the more and more that I'm having high profile guests like yourself on the show, I say that with the utmost respect, I'm finding out that the majority of you call yourself introverts. And I was always taught, and I thought that I knew, that most great salespeople, great consultants, great people that are in business are extroverts. Can you tell me, has the definition of introvert versus extrovert changed, or where do you stand on that?
Well, you're talking about one of my great pranks. I mean, I'm not an introvert. No introvert drives those cars or leads my lifestyle.
Thank you.
So,
I was confused.
I've told people that for years just to kid them, but I'm not an introvert. But the fact is, virtually no one's an introvert or an extrovert. There's an introversion-extroversion scale, a continuum. And you're usually comfortable at some place on it, but you can change. You can go left or right based on the conditions. So for example, when somebody who's considered a high extrovert meets even a higher extrovert, they tend to back off. So it's a scale. We adjust our manner to the times, and that's the way it should be.
Very good. I was really confused. I was puzzled when I read that you said that, because you fooled me. You sold it.
Yeah, I sold everybody. I'm a good sales guy.
You sold it. Indeed, indeed. Looking forward, looking out into the future, you can kind of see where things are going, and we've talked about it a little bit here. But if you could, what would you change about the direction that business and that consulting, even just the the professional marketplace, what would you change about where it's heading?
Well, I don't know that I change anything. I think that what we need is more empathy. I think what we need is more appreciation of people and less of systems and processes and procedures and technology and artificial intelligence and everything else. Because it will always be about people. It will always be about communications. I get a big charge out of this Roomba, whatever. I mean, here's an artificial intelligent vacuum cleaner, right? And my wife buys one, and it bothers my German Shepherd. And so he'll get in front of it and shake, and the thing will hit his hair and get immediately clogged up. So it's useless. And so if a dog can outwit it, artificial intelligence is hardly going to steal jobs. So I think that I'd like to see more of an appreciation for the fact that you need to treat people well. You need to treat employees well, and you need to treat customers well. I've never seen a company that had unhappy employees and happy customers. It doesn't work that way. JetBlue will do anything to make customers happy. American Airlines and Doug Parker, who's the CEO, just don't have a clue. And I'm a 2 million miler on American, but they don't have a clue right now. And so here are two organizations in the same industry, and one understands customers and the other does not. And that's a culture, and that's a belief system. So I would like to see an increased empathy, and I'd like to see consultants stop trying to look for money and start trying to think about the value they offer. Because if you get up in the morning and you say, oh my God, I got to pay the mortgage, I have some debts, I haven't sold something for a month, you're going to go out and try to sell, which psychologically is taking something from someone, taking their money. If you get up in the morning and say, I've got so much value to offer, I can't wait to see people. That psychology is giving. I'm giving you something. So I have no qualms about going after you. And consultants have to be the latter, not the former.
Yeah, I would even say that business people and salespeople do as well, because in the prior, it takes energy to take something. And in the latter, I actually generate or get energy when I'm giving that value away. So it's actually funner, healthier, and ultimately more profitable. Hey, we're coming to the end of our time here together, Alan. I appreciate all of your wisdom and advice here, but I have a couple of signature questions that I'd like to ask you, and I ask all the guests these. So there is no wrong answer. They're pretty easy to do too. I'm anxious to hear your answers to the question. So here we go. Number one, if you could pick up that thing called the telephone, and on the other end of the line answered a 30-year-old Alan Weiss, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Keep better track and develop contacts. Never lose names. Always build your list.
Yeah, keep that Rolodex growing and permeating. And then how do you nurture that list? What's some good techniques that you've seen to
you keep
nurture
sending them value. You keep sending things out to help people, not offers. You send them things to help people. You send them newsletters. You send them advisories. You send them reports. You blog, but you make yourself indispensable to them.
Well said. Very good. So the second question is a little more fun, but it can be pretty interesting to hear the answers. Here it goes. Alan, if you could have a legitimate superpower, which one would you choose, and what would you do with it?
I would choose telepathy, and I would use it to get to a higher rank on Angry Birds.
The video game you're talking about, I'm sure.
I play Angry Birds Friends. I'm almost to diamond level 11, but I'm unhappy with the speed of my progress.
Well, that's funny. Yeah, you're an interesting fellow. Hey, I want to just take a second here and thank you personally. I've learned a tremendous amount just from studying you, from following you. I'm very honored that you took the time to be on the show today. And I think I can thank you on behalf of all of your customers and clients in the past, the people that you've influenced. We appreciate you. And thanks for being on the show today. And we all, I'm sure, wish you, and I do, wish you much fortune and success, both now and in the future. And as we say on the Awesome Wholesaler experience, it's about the journey. And sir, we wish you well on yours. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Wholesalers, thanks for tuning in. And if you'd like to support the show, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And like our friend Jeffrey Gittimer said, if you're so inclined, share the episode with both of your friends. But seriously, though, if you do enjoy the show, would it be too much trouble to rate and review? It really does help. And we appreciate you supporting Mr. Weiss and his new book coming out. I think it might be out. It's the 5th edition of $1 Million Consulting. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching. Thanks for supporting the show. And, of course, thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.